I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are a turkey.
Okay, a turkey.
Yeah, a turkey. And, life is undeniably good. Like, for 1,000 consecutive days, you are fed, you are cared for, you have shelter.
Sounds pretty ideal, honestly.
Right. Every single day that passes gives you, like, more and more statistical proof that humans are just your absolute best friends.
They're looking out for you.
Exactly. They're actively looking out for your best interests. You have this massive, robust data set, 1,000 data points proving this is just an undeniable fact of life. But then, and you probably see where this is going, then comes the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Ah, yeah, the wake-up call.
To you, the turkey, what happens next is just this unpredictable, devastating shock that totally shatters your entire understanding of the world. But to the butcher, it is literally just another Wednesday.
It's just a regular day on the job. And, the turkey's tragedy is really the perfect entry point into the mechanics of uncertainty. Because the animal wasn't killed by a sudden change in the rules of the universe.
Right.
It was killed by a catastrophic gap in its own data. The boundaries of its knowledge ended exactly where its risk began.
That is such a fascinating way to frame it. And welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, our mission is to explore the concept of Black Swan events, and we are diving deep into the groundbreaking framework created by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
It's a heavy one, but so important.
Oh, absolutely. And we aren't just going to define what these unpredictable events are. We want to look under the hood of human psychology, right?
Yeah.
To figure out why our brains are just biologically hardwired to misunderstand uncertainty.
And why the people in the fancy suits, the so-called experts and forecasters, why they get it so spectacularly wrong when the stakes are at their absolute highest.
Yes, the empty suits, will definitely get to them. And most importantly, we're going to explore how you can use simple, practical tools like the strategic barbell method to actually protect yourself and even thrive when the world throws a black swan your way.
Right, because you can't predict them, but you can prepare. But before we diagnose our blind spots, we should probably clearly define the phenomenon itself.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
What exactly makes a black swan a black swan?
Well, it's not just any unexpected surprise. It has to have 3 distinct non-negotiable attributes.
Yeah.
First, it is an extreme outlier. Like, nothing in the past convincingly points to its possibility.
Okay, so total curveball.
Total curveball. Second, it carries a massive disproportionate impact. It completely rewrites the rules of the game.
And the third?
The third, and this is honestly where human psychology really complicates things, we are compelled to concoct explanations for it after the fact.
Oh, right, the hindsight bias.
Exactly. We look backward and we stitch together this neat little narrative that makes the event seem, perfectly explainable and predictable, even though literally nobody predicted it at the time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if a black swan is, by definition, something that exists completely outside our realm of expectation, why are we so universally confident that we have a grip on reality?
It's a great question.
Like, to understand our blindness, we have to look at the anatomy of how we actually process the world around us.
Yeah, and the core mechanism driving that blindness is a concept Taleb calls epistemic opacity.
Epistemic opacity.
Right, which basically means history does not reveal its mind to us. Think of it like dining at a high-end restaurant, okay?
I'm with you.
You sit in this pristine dining room, and a beautifully plated dish is set right in front of you. That is the outcome. What you don't see is the chaotic, messy, highly volatile process in the kitchen that produced it.
The yelling, the grease fires.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the generator of the event. And because our brains only interact with that final perfect plate of food, we suffer from this illusion of understanding. We perceive the world as much more orderly and explainable than it actually is.
And because of that opacity, a black swan is entirely relative to your specific vantage point. Like, if you are the turkey relying entirely on your 1,000 days being fed, you are the sucker in the equation.
Yep, you're the sucker.
But the butcher operates with a completely different set of information. It makes me think of a modern corporate collapse. A massive company goes bankrupt seemingly overnight.
Happens all the time.
Right. And the entry-level employee who just signed a mortgage is completely blindsided. To them, it's a massive black swan. But the corrupt executive who has been cooking the books for 3 years.
They saw the cliff approaching from miles away.
Exactly. They are the butcher.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure we, as everyday listeners, adjust our vantage point to stop playing the role of the turkey?
Well, escaping that fate requires, honestly, a pretty aggressive audit of our own mental machinery. We have to look at the specific biological and psychological algorithms that our minds run on.
Because our brains didn't evolve for the modern stock market.
No, not at all. Our brains evolved to jump to very quick conclusions because, historically, hesitation meant death, right? But in a highly complex modern world, those evolutionary shortcuts become really lethal liabilities. And Taleb points out 5 specific mental prediction errors that actively blind us to uncertainty.
Okay, let's break those down, because this is essentially the human error margin we all just unknowingly walk around with every single day.
Right. So the first one is the error of confirmation.
Oh, confirmation bias.
Yeah, but it's deeper than just having an opinion. Rather than acting like scientists who test hypotheses by trying to disprove them, we act like defense attorneys.
We just build a case.
Exactly. We scour our environment exclusively for evidence that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. And our brains literally seamlessly filter out anything that contradicts them.
The underlying logic here is so fascinating, especially when you look at the round-trip fallacy.
Yes, the round-trip fallacy is a perfect example.
We constantly confuse no evidence of black swans with evidence of no black swans.
Right.
They sound totally identical to the casual ear, but mathematically, they are worlds apart. It's like Taleb points out that if you firmly believe seeing a white swan proves there are no black swans, then following that exact same logic, seeing a red Mini Cooper should also prove there are no black swans.
Because a red Mini Cooper is not a black swan either.
Right. It just completely exposes the logical absurdity of how we construct our biases.
It really does. And that logical gap sets the perfect stage for the second error. Because confirmation bias forces us to cherry-pick these isolated data points, our brains are left with a pile of just disconnected facts.
And we can't handle that.
No, we can't hold raw, chaotic data in our working memory. So we deploy the narrative fallacy. We weave those cherry-picked facts into a coherent story. The human brain craves distinct patterns.
So we just make up a story to connect the dots.
Exactly. When we look back at a chaotic, highly random series of historical events, we automatically draw a straight line through them. We reduce the dimensions of reality so it just feels manageable.
But wait, hold on. I have to push back here a little bit.
Sure.
Isn't storytelling fundamentally how humans have survived? Like myths, legends, cautionary tales passed around the fire. This is literally how we transmit survival knowledge across generations. Are we really saying our single greatest evolutionary tool is now our biggest liability?
I mean, yes and no. There's an evolutionary reason storytelling worked in the past, but the environment has fundamentally changed.
How so?
Well, in our ancestral environment, risks were concrete and immediate, right? A predator in the brush, a rival tribe, a sudden drop in temperature. A simple narrative effectively captured the whole threat.
Okay, that makes sense.
But today, our world is incredibly abstract and interconnected. When we force a neat 3-act narrative onto a complex global supply chain crisis or a sudden financial collapse, we actively strip away all the messy, invisible, random factors that actually triggered it. We trick ourselves into a false sense of security.
Thinking that the event was logical and predictable when it totally wasn't.
Exactly.
Which I guess flows perfectly into the third mental trap. Behaving as if the black swan just doesn't exist. Our reliance on visceral stories makes us completely numb to modern abstract risks.
What's really fascinating here is the total disconnect between our emotional system and our analytical brain.
Like the fight or flight response.
Yeah. Our amygdala will trigger a massive adrenaline spike if we see a shadow move in a dark alley. But we do not have a physiological reaction to a spreadsheet projecting a massive systemic market vulnerability.
Even though the spreadsheet could ruin our lives.
Right. Because we are not physically wired to fear abstract probabilities, our default behavior is to just act as if they simply aren't there.
Wow. And the fourth error really brings this all into sharp focus, I think. The distortion of silent evidence. Which basically says history is essentially a graveyard of failures that we never actually get to see.
This is where our perception of risk gets dangerously warped. We only ever study the survivors.
The winners write the history books.
Exactly. We look at a famous historical adventurer like Casanova, right? He survived countless lethal escapades, and our narrative fallacy tells us he must have possessed some innate genius or unfailing luck.
Because he survived.
Because he survived. What we don't see are the thousands of other adventurers who possess the exact same traits, took the exact same risks, and died completely anonymously. History doesn't write biographies about the people who didn't make it.
That is the ultimate aha moment for how we evaluate success today. It's like the entire modern self-help industry.
Oh, 100%.
We buy these books analyzing the morning routines of billionaires, and we think, oh, they wake up at 4 a.m. and take ice baths. So that must be the magic formula.
Right, just buy a cold plunge and you'll be a billionaire.
Exactly. We are completely ignoring the silent cemetery of tens of thousands of bankrupt entrepreneurs who also woke up at 4 a.m. and took ice baths. The failures just don't hang around to warn you that the strategy is flawed.
The math underneath that analogy points to a massive survival bias. And because we are so overwhelmed by the visible survivors and totally blind to the hidden failures, we default to the fifth mental error, which is tunneling.
Tunneling, like tunnel vision.
Basically, we have a limited cognitive load. So we focus intensely on a few well-defined local sources of uncertainty, the things that easily come to mind, and we completely block out the vast universe of unexpected outliers. We prepare for the risks we can actually name.
Oh, man. Here's where it gets really interesting, because I can relate to tunneling on a painfully personal level.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is the exact psychology behind the planning fallacy in a weekend DIY home renovation project.
Oh, no.
You watch a tutorial, you map out the drywall, you estimate, hey, it'll take 2 days and cost $100. You are tunneling on the visible variables.
Right, the stuff you can see.
What you don't plan for is the moment you open the wall, find a microscopic leak, which reveals black mold, which requires structural repair. Suddenly, your little weekend project is a 3-month, $5,000 absolute nightmare. You only plan for the knowns, completely ignoring the unknown unknowns lurking behind the plaster.
That home renovation is a great microexample. But if we scale that psychology up to the global economy, the stakes change entirely. When an individual tunnels, they lose their weekend and a few grand. When a society tunnels, we get the tragedy of the empty suit.
The empty suit. The people we pay millions of dollars to supposedly predict the future.
Exactly. An empty suit is a professional economic forecasters, political analysts, risk managers who possess a terrifying amount of epistemic arrogance.
Epistemic arrogance.
Yeah, they have this illusion of knowledge. Because they have advanced degrees and use highly complex mathematical models, they genuinely believe they can predict the future. But their actual track record is often no better than a random cab driver just guessing at a stoplight.
It's not just that they don't know, it's that they are aggressively confident in their ignorance.
Yes. There is a famous study conducted on Harvard MBA students that totally exposes the mechanics of this arrogance. The students were asked to estimate various obscure facts and provide a range they were 98% sure about, meaning they were explicitly instructed to factor in a 2% error rate for what they just didn't know.
I mean, a 2% error rate seems like a very generous cushion for highly educated people. You'd really expect them to nail that.
You would, but their actual error rate was a staggering 45%.
45%?
45%.
Yeah.
Their brains literally could not comprehend how wide their confidence interval needed to be to actually account for their own ignorance. They anchored to their initial guesses.
That is wild.
And we see this planning fallacy on a monumental scale in the real world. Think about the Sydney Opera House. It opened 10 years late and massively over budget. Why? Because the highly paid planners tunneled. They only accounted for the variables they could model on a neat little spreadsheet.
Okay, so we had these empty suits driving the global economy, using totally flawed mental machinery and ignoring silent evidence. But you mentioned earlier that the models they use are also fundamentally broken. Let's map out the environments we're actually operating in, because mixing up your domain is where the real catastrophes happen.
Right. To manage risks properly, you have to understand the difference between Mediocristan and Extremistan.
Mediocristan and Extremistan.
Yep. Mediocristan is the province of the physical world. It is strictly bound by physical constraints, like gravity and thermodynamics. Think of human height or caloric intake.
Okay.
If you gather 1,000 random people in a stadium and you add the heaviest, tallest human biologically possible to that crowd.
So the biggest person on Earth.
Right. The total average height or weight barely moves. In Mediocristan, no single observation can meaningfully alter the aggregate. The extremes are capped by physics.
But Extremistan operates on entirely different math.
Completely different.
Because it's not physical, it's abstract, scalable, informational. Like wealth, book sales, internet traffic, financial markets. If you take that exact same stadium of 1,000 random people and you add Bill Gates to the crowd, suddenly he represents 99.9% of the entire wealth in that stadium.
Exactly. One single rare observation doesn't just change the total, it completely dominates it.
So this raises an important question. Why do the empty suits consistently blow up the economy?
Because they take risk management tools designed exclusively for Mediocristan, and they blindly apply them to Extremistan. Specifically, they use the Gaussian bell curve.
Let's explain why the bell curve fails so miserably here. Because the bell curve basically assumes that the vast majority of data clusters neatly around the average, right? And that extreme deviations, the tails, are so mathematically improbable you can just effectively ignore them.
And that assumption is incredibly lethal in Extremistan. Extremistan is defined by fat tails, meaning extreme outlier events hold a massive share of the probability and the consequence.
Right.
If you apply a bell curve to the stock market, your model tells you a market crash of a certain magnitude should only happen, say, once every 10,000 years. When it happens twice in a single decade, your model is proved fundamentally absurd. Applying bell curve risk management in Extremistan gives you a mathematically verified false sense of security right up until the very moment a black swan wipes your entire portfolio out.
I want to ask you, the listener, to actually look at your own life through this lens. Like, what environment is your career in? Are you in a non-scalable profession, like a dentist or a mechanic?
Right, where you're paid by the hour.
Exactly. If so, you are operating in Mediocristan. Your downside is protected, but your upside is strictly capped by the number of hours in a day. Or are you in a scalable profession, an author, a tech founder, an investor? Then you are in Extremistan, where a single positive black swan could make you a global phenomenon overnight, but a negative one could bankrupt you.
Identifying your domain is so critical because our globalized, hyper-connected world is rapidly shifting almost entirely into Extremistan. Wealth, knowledge, influence the world, they're all becoming winner-take-all dynamics.
So the rules have changed.
They have. Because of this structural shift, we need a radically different approach to how we manage our investments, our careers, and our strategic flexibility. We have to abandon the illusion that we can predict the unpredictable. Instead, we have to build a system that actively protects us when our predictions are inevitably wrong.
Okay, we've thoroughly diagnosed the disease here. The world is highly unpredictable. Our psychological wiring makes us blind to it, and the so-called experts are driving us off a cliff using the wrong maps.
Pretty bleak summary, but yes.
So how do we actually protect ourselves in a constant state of uncertainty? Like, how do we build strategic flexibility into our own lives?
Well, Taleb's mathematical answer to this is a concept called the strategic barbell method.
The barbell method.
Right. It is a philosophy for 100% risk management. Imagine a physical barbell in a gym. Okay. Heavy weights loaded on the two extreme ends with absolutely nothing in the middle. The fundamental rule of this strategy is to completely abandon medium risk investments or life choices.
Because medium risk is a trap. A medium risk asset might yield a modest, 5% return, but it is still fully exposed to a hidden Extremistan blow-up that could wipe out the entire principal.
Exactly.
You are taking on massive, uncomputable downside for just a mediocre upside.
That's the exact asymmetry you want to avoid. So the barbell method shifts your exposure to the extreme edges. You take 85 to 90% of your resources, your money, your time, your energy, and you lock it up in hyper-conservative, ultra-safe instruments.
We are talking treasury bills, guaranteed baselines, the safest vehicles on the planet.
Yes. You protect your floor, absolutely. Then you take the remaining 10 to 15% and you allocate it to extremely speculative, hyper-aggressive bets. Venture capital, out-of-the-money options, highly experimental ideas.
But wait, a skeptic would look at that and say putting 15% of your life savings into hyper-speculative, crazy bets is just glorified gambling? I mean, how is that considered prudent risk management?
Because the prudence is in the clipping of the downside. By keeping 85 to 90% completely insulated from market shocks, you are mathematically clipping your incomputable risk.
Okay, I see.
If a massive negative black swan hits and the market drops to zero, the absolute worst case scenario is you lose that 10 or 15%. Your survival is guaranteed, you cannot be ruined. But that highly speculative 15% is fully exposed to the scalable upside of Extremistan. If a positive black swan hits one of those bets, the returns are practically infinite.
Ah, the light bulb just went on.
Yeah.
You are putting a hard concrete floor on your downside while completely removing the ceiling on your upside. You survive the negative black swans, but you are constantly fishing for the positive one.
Exactly. And implementing this requires understanding the difference between positive and negative contingencies. A negative black swan environment is something like banking, homeland security, or running a nuclear power plant. If there is a surprise, it is exclusively going to be catastrophic.
Right, nobody wants a surprise at a nuclear plant.
Yeah, nobody. But a positive black swan environment is venture capital, movie production, or scientific research. You might lose a little bit of money on a long string of failed experiments or box office flops, but one surprise blockbuster pays for all the failures 10,000 times over. The barbell strategy forces you to maximize your exposure to those positive contingencies.
That structural approach makes complete sense for a hedge fund manager, sure. But for the listener navigating just their everyday career, what are some practical decision-making exercises to apply this barbell logic?
The most immediate shift you can make is to base your decisions strictly on consequences, not probabilities.
Consequences, not probability.
Right. When we try to calculate the probability of a massive earthquake, we are basically guessing. The variables are far too opaque. But we do not need to know the odds if we know the impact. The consequence of an earthquake is total financial ruin. Because the consequence is unacceptable, you buy earthquake insurance, regardless of what the probability models say.
Base decisions on the magnitude of the impact, not the likelihood of the event. That entirely reframes how we look at worst-case scenarios. But what about the aggressive side of the barbell? How do we capture the upside?
You capture the upside through a process of aggressive tinkering. You want to collect as many free non-lottery tickets as humanly possible.
Non-lottery tickets.
Yeah. This means intentionally placing yourself in environments where the cost of failure is negligible, but the potential serendipitous payoff is life-changing. Go to parties outside your social circle. Strike up conversations with strangers in different industries. Move to a dense, chaotic city if you have the means. Try starting a low-cost side hustle.
And most of these things won't pan out.
Right. Most of these interactions will lead nowhere, and the cost is just a few hours of your time. But one chance encounter could be the positive black swan that redefines your entire career. The more you tinker, the more surface area you create for positive randomness to strike.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring all these threads together. We are navigating a world that has structurally shifted into Extremistan, an environment where single, highly improbable events dictate the entire course of global history and our personal lives.
Yep.
Yet we are walking through this landscape with brains wired for the Pleistocene era, constantly falling for narrative fallacies, cherry-picking data to confirm our biases, and ignoring the silent cemetery of failures.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, the empty suits we trust to manage our institutions are flying completely blind, stubbornly applying the bell curve of Mediocristan to an Extremistan reality. But, and here's the good news, by acknowledging our own epistemic opacity, by accepting that we simply cannot predict the future, we gain a massive strategic advantage. We can deploy the barbell strategy to fiercely insulate ourselves from absolute ruin while aggressively tinkering to catch life-altering positive surprises.
Perfectly said. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate takeaway is a shift in posture. You stop trying to outsmart uncertainty, and instead, you domesticate it, which leads to a final question worth deeply considering.
Lay it on us.
If the most consequential events in human history, the advent of the internet, massive market shifts, the discovery of penicillin if they were completely unpredicted, what highly improbable, massively positive opportunity are you currently ignoring simply because you can't plot it neatly on a spreadsheet? We exhaust so much of our finite energy trying to forecast the weather, desperate to predict the exact day the storm will arrive. Stop trying to predict the rain and just build an ark.
Stop trying to predict the rain and just build an ark. I love that. And to take it one step further, make sure that ark isn't just built for survival. Make sure it has a wide open deck to catch whatever unpredictable, phenomenal good fortune falls from the sky. Because the beauty of Extremistan isn't just that it carries risk, it's that it offers asymmetrical upside if you are positioned to receive it. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration arms you to step out into the complexity of the world. Stay aggressively curious, ruthlessly protect your downside, and actively seek out serendipity. Maybe go to that cocktail party you were planning to skip. You never know what kind of positive black swan is waiting by the appetizer tray. Don't be the turkey, be the butcher.